Good morning. We have a quorum. Since the last meeting, we have issued 3 information papers. They are from Mr. IP Kin-yuen and Mr. Jonathan Ho in relation to student guidance service in primary schools, and a reply from the administration. Sorry, Mrs. Yip. Thank you. Item 1. As you know that on the 1st of June, I wrote a letter to you about the Tuen Mun school involving suspected sexual harassment involving a female teacher, where you said that you have to wait until there is a reply from the administration. This morning, I received a reply, and they said that is related to privacy. However, in that incident, no one was named. It was only the district that was mentioned. And the Education Bureau reply said that the way it was handled by the school was not appropriate. So what are they going to do? A number of complaints have been received by myself and other fellow members. Some question why the teacher did not report it to the police so that it can be followed up criminally. However, the way the school handled it was inappropriate because the male teacher continued to be promoted, whereas the female teacher, who is the victim, has been oppressed. They have not done anything to follow it up, and they waited till the last minute to send me a reply saying that they would seriously follow it up. The Education Bureau told us that they are directly following up with this incident. The Secretary for Education will come in shortly. Perhaps you can ask him. Item 2. Progress of the task force on review of self-financing post-secondary education. Please invite the administration to come in. We have Secretary for Education Mr. Kevin Young, Task Force on Review of Self-Financing Post-Secondary Education Mr. Anthony Zhang, as well as Mr. Brian Low of the Education Bureau. He is the Deputy Secretary. Secretary, please. Thank you. Last year, in the Chief Executive's first policy address, said that she was going to look into a number of issues related to post-secondary education. They have abided by the principle of professional-led to look into a number of issues. The review of self-financing post-secondary education task force was incepted in October last year. They are tasked to look into a number of issues, say, for example, role of the self-financing operation of subvented institutions vis-à-vis self-financing post-secondary educations, and the future development of sub-degree programs, as well as the ecology of self-financing sector. They have prepared a consultation document to invite stakeholders as well as members of the public to express their views. We have with us the chairman of the task force, Professor Anthony Zhang, to take you over their preliminary observations as well as the work in the future. In previous meetings, some members asked about non-means test scheme for students signing up for self-financing programs, as well as its impact on intake. Starting from 2017-18, for 15 eligible institutions, we have received 300 eligible students a non-means test subsidy. In 2017-18, about 20,000 students benefited from it. From the information received by these tertiary institutions, the number of students rose and dropped, and the number of institutions receiving eligible students also increase and decrease at the same time. We don't see, as a result, any direct impact by this subsidies scheme. We do not want to affect student intake. Institutions still have the autonomy to decide on student admission. They will take into account the overall number of students, and students will consider the courses offered as well as the institutions before they decide which to sign up. We will continue to monitor the situation as well as the implementation of support measures. I'll now defer to Professor Anthony Cheung. There has been more and more places offered by post-secondary education institutions. Currently, over 70% of students have signed up for post-secondary education courses, and as well as graduate and undergraduate courses. We would like to enhance quality. A lot of students and parents are of the view that when it comes to self-financing courses, it plays a complementary role only. So they would like to, in the end, be articulated to undergraduate or degree courses. There has been a dropping number of students to certain institutions. This may be a threat to some institutions. However, it's also an opportunity for them to review the situation.
Upon the publication of the consultation paper, we have also heard some voices from the community. The main reform directions are that we believe that the administration is duty-bound to nurture talents and also to develop post-secondary education in order to support the innovation in our society. There are three main points in our recommendations. First, it has to be student-oriented and quality-oriented. We would also have to look at Hong Kong's strength in providing such resources. We would also like to have diversified development in our community. And there are six main areas in our recommendations. We'd like to comprehensively look at the policy in supporting self-financing institutions so that there can be parallel development in the public and private sector. For self-financing post-secondary education sector and also the publicly funded education sector, they should be complementary to one another, and there should be parallel developments, and in the end, we'd like to enrich the landscape of Hong Kong's post-secondary education sector. We believe that the administration has the duty to comprehensively enhance the quality of education in the private sector and also the overall academic performance of the private sector so that we'll be able to nurture more talents. And in terms of support for the post-secondary institutions, there needs to be reforms in the self-financing sector, and the administration will have to come up with a roadmap for them so that they be able to look at their own strengths and also planning so that there can be distinction in different areas so that there would be more diversified and sustainable development in the post-secondary sector. Overall speaking, the self-financing post-secondary education sector should be able to develop their own distinctive roles and positioning so that in July 2015, the administration has already come up with papers on the roadmap for the self-financing post-secondary sector that should form the roadmap for them, and in the long run we should come up with the policies and strategy so that there can be implementation, and then the individual institutions will be able to look at their own position and also unique role, and they should also look at their academic qualification, academic quality, and also student enrollment so that there can be sustained long-term development. Thirdly, the task force is of the view that the administration should increase its support for the self-financing institutions in order to have more autonomy and also for the healthy development in the sector. The administration should promote the strategic coordination amongst various institutions so that they can develop their own expertise And we can also consider offering more support in order to help some of these institutions to develop their own excellence areas in certain areas. Fourthly, the task force is of the view that we should also come up with a more comprehensive regulatory system with regard to the CAP 320, the Post-Secondary Colleges Ordinance. There should be a comprehensive review and amendment, and upon amendment, it should apply to all locally accredited self-financing sub-degree programs. And we believe that for institutions migrating to the new system, there should be more support from the administration, and there should be a transparent and fair mechanism. A clear policy should be formulated in order to underpin this, and for operators whose development and institutional capabilities that fall short of their original plan, their accreditation should be cancelled or deregistered, because these institutions have to demonstrate their competency in continuing to offer the appropriate level of self-financing post-secondary programs, and the Council for Accreditation and Academic and Vocational Qualification should also be upgraded, and they should also be given appropriate resources. Fifthly, the task force is of the view that we will have to provide a very clear positioning of these institutions. We have to look at international experience and also voices in the community. We believe that we should, by and large, adopt the current dual-track approach. But then for sub-degree programs, and the positioning should be redefined so that there can be a clearer distinction between the two in order to enhance the roles played by each of them. And in the long run, we should also look at how we can improve the design of sub-degree programs. In particular, for higher diploma, it should be better differentiated and fit for purpose. Sixthly, the administration should also look at how we can strengthen our support for students pursuing locally accredited sub-degree programs. And we have noticed that there are diversified views in the community. That's why we are seeking further views. First, do we need to maintain the current level of support, that is the SSSDP, that is the existing support mechanism, which will cover designated professions and sectors, or should we offer one-off startup loan or grant to self-financing institutions for developing worthwhile sub-degree programs with high market relevance and high upfront investment? And third, we can also consider enhancing support for all other eligible students of self-financing sub-degree programs through the provision of non-means-tested annual tuition fee subsidy. After the publication of the paper, we have already started a 2-month consultation period up to the end of August. In the course of it, we will not just be listening to views from the community, we will also be organizing consultation forums with stakeholders, and after collecting the views, we intend to make our final recommendations and report to the administration by the end of this year. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Cheung. Before we start our discussion on the paper, Mrs. Ip, do you have something to ask the Bureau Director? Yes, first of all, Bureau Director, I'd like to thank the chairperson for allowing me to raise this first. That's the question that I asked this morning. You said that that had nothing to do with privacy, but then I did not disclose the name of the victim. I just referred to the district, and still you're trying to evade the question. In fact, it's not just about criminal investigation. It's about the unfair treatment or handling of the incident by the headmaster, and also the female teacher was suppressed, and she was prohibited from giving evidence and so on. Bureau Director. Madam Chair, I'd like to apologize to Mrs. Ip personally, because I have taken that very seriously personally. That's why I've spent some time to find out more about the case, and I tried to give a personal reply before I asked my colleague to forward that to this council. Probably I was rather busy, and that's why the matter has been delayed, and only last night have we been able to issue the reply. In fact, I've been taking this very very seriously and been following up on this. And with regard to the handling of the incident, we respect the school's autonomy. We would just have to make sure that the school has followed all the established procedures in handling the case, whether or not there has been a case of harassment and so on. That's not within the remit purview of the Education Bureau. But then in looking into the case, we believe that there is something left to be decided by the school in terms of the handling of the incident. We will continue to follow up on this. Okay, thank you, Bureau Director. Now, let's move back on to the subject under discussion. That's about the progress of the review of the self-financing post-secondary education sector. So there are 5 members who would like to speak: Ma Fong Kwok, Regina Ip Kin-yuen, Au Lok Hin, Cheng Chong Tai, Ted Hui, and also Starry Lee, and also Chang Kwok Kwan. 3 minutes each. First, Ma Fong Kwok. Thank you, Madam Chair. 3 minutes is a bit too short. After the publication of the report, I think the more controversial points are 2. That's point 6 with regard to the mechanism after a reasonable period of trial. If they are not able to perform as promised, then they could be deregistered. And also the subparagraph 6, that's about the self-financing program. They will have to be completely separated from the university that they are under, and they will have to be subjected to the new mechanism of regulation. But then what if? So first of all, what about what is the assessment mechanism and what's the reasonable period of time? How long will that be? So, and if they are not up to the mark, you have to deregister them. What will happen to the students? So they'll be facing very serious problems. For example, for the program that they've been taking, well, for other institutions, they might not be on offer. Does that mean that they will have to change course or what? So, is there anything that you will have to do to ensure that you'll be able to protect their interests? That's point number 1. And then 6.2. For some of the local or UGC-funded institutions, and they've also got subsidiary institutions, and you want them to be completely separated from their parent university. But then for students who are enjoying the better environment from the parent university, they'll be losing that. So how are you going to ensure that they are not going to be adversely affected by this? So how are you going to make up for them? So can you respond to that? Bureau Director or Professor Zhang? Let me respond to the second point first. Well, upon the amendment of CAP 320, we proposed that for raw institutions offering self-financing sub-degree programs, they should be subjected to the new regulation, including the so-called community colleges or institutions set up by UGC-funded universities. But then in terms of the account, it's separated from the university itself, and also their registration will not be affected. In other words, under the new CAP 320, they will have to be registered. So that would apply to all institutions offering sub-degree programs. For all the existing facilities and so on, there will be no impact whatsoever. But then in the transitional period, for any issues that might arise, we believe that we will have to look into that, and in the later report we'll be addressing that. Next, what about the first question? Can I answer the first question then? Well, please be brief and concise because we will have to control the time. Well, in terms of quality assurance, that's a framework, and we believe that that is appropriate. But then we should not be using that casually as to what the criteria should be. We will have to look into that further. Well, for any deregistration, of course, it has to be done on the basis that for students who are pursuing these programs, they should not be affected. So in terms of the arrangements, we will have to look at how we can make sure that students will not be affected. That will be the basis. Okay, what about the timetable? What about the time frame? I think 3 minutes would not be very realistic. In fact, 1 hour would be too short. This is a major item. This is a major consultation exercise. But then today, this is our first discussion only. I'm sure there will be more chances for us to discuss it. Mrs. Regina Ip, Chairman, the consultation will end in end of August. I hope that we can also organize a public hearing because just now some young people have come and petitioned to us, and some of them are victims because they are taking such courses, and they said that for associate degree programs it's like high school programs, and for English they are only taught as to how they can write letters and so on, and they pay very high tuition fees. And even if they are offered $30,000 in terms of study coupons, that would not help. So I do have very strong views about whether or not we should commercialize tertiary education. Well, in 2009, the administration decided to turn it into a commercial entity, and under Cap 320, they accredit local institutions. But then I've often criticized that that is only a paper exercise. Even if you have the HKCAA VQ as to what they do in class, I think the accreditation is very ambiguous, and there are also a lot of duplication in terms of the curriculum, a lot of liberal studies, and also creative communication and so on. So there are a lot of duplications and repetitive areas, and they will not be very competitive upon graduation. And as Professor Zhang just said, for some of the programs, the graduates might be very competitive, while some of the institutions have more resources and better teaching qualification and so on. For nursing programs and so on, they have their own hospitals, and we are short of nursing staff and so on. So those would be needed by our community. But then for other curriculum on programs, they are very shorty programs, and spending 4 years in those programs is not just about the money spent. Well, even if there is support from the administration, it's a waste of their 4 years, and as a result, many young people are not happy with this.
I do ask the Secretary for Education to seriously consider it and to regulate them. Well, about 8 or 10 years ago, when Mrs. Laura Cha was the chairman of the UGC, suggested regulation. We have approved certain programs. Currently, under Cap 320, the EXCO would look into it, and it would just a vetting on paper. They will usually approve these programs, otherwise there will be judicial review. And several years later, these institutions will be upgraded to become universities. Who would benefit? Operators. So when you started off with secondary school principal, you become vice chancellor of a university. And just ordinary teachers will become, say, professors. So they are the first people who benefit from it. I would like to hear what the government's doing to support students. Regarding public hearing, we will look into it, and we'll discuss it with the administration as to arrangements and as to time and who to invite. Mr. IP Kin-yuen, I support a public hearing. It would be technically difficult to arrange one during the summer break, but we do need to listen to different views. From the year 2000, when Tong Chi-hwa said the participation rate would be increased to 60%. There was very little involvement on the part of the administration. Now they said that everyone should participate, and they would want to set things straight. It will be difficult. It's a belated review. In any event, it's better late than never. Yes, this issue is difficult. The task force has made some very good observations. I would like to ask Professor Zhang as to feasibility. Say, for example, for the two groups of institutions, they would be grouped under CAP 320, Post-Secondary Colleges Ordinance for regulation. You said that publicly financed and private ones can be developed in tandem. However, for the 8 universities vis-a-vis self-financing post-secondary education institutions, you group them under one umbrella for regulation. You said that you will also align quality assurance system. How can you ensure that these two groups of institutions would see their qualities enhanced? Say, for example, for self-financing ones, how do they benefit from it? And for the 8 institutions under UGC, they will benefit. And it won't be the case that some of them will be suppressed. It doesn't sound like an easy idea. Professor Zhang, to move to a new regulatory regime under CAP 320 will involve adjustments. Self-financing educational institutions run under UGC institutions, we would like them to have their quality enhanced and maybe one day become private universities. For private institutions, yes, quality varies. As Mrs. Ip said, we would need to enhance overall quality. In our report about the regulatory regime, we will give you more details. We would like them to enhance their quality. And if they can't, or if they fall short of standards, then there will be deregistration. Mr. Ma Fong Kwok asked about timing. The Education Bureau will have to look into it. Next, Mr. Ao Nok Hin. Thank you. I have a lot of observations to make. Well, I agree with what the report said, that there should be better differentiation of roles between associate degree and higher diploma. For associate degree, it should be further enhanced to facilitate articulation to undergraduate degree programs. Currently, it is rather unclear. So students who have taken associate degree courses or higher diploma programs, they expect to be articulated with degree programs, but the chance is slim. In effect, they will have wasted 2 years having paid the tuition fees. The core problem is that there is a shortage of degree programs. The Education Bureau should increase the number of undergraduate programs, including those with articulation. Well, there may be some articulation programs, but there are doubts about the acceptability of these articulated programs because they are still not the same as undergraduate programs. The third point. Well, self-financing institutions affiliated with universities and those without the affiliation. How will the reform go? I think you need to be very careful so that it won't be like communism. You sacrifice quality to unify the system. Self-financing institutions affiliated with universities Well, should there be a complete delinking? I don't oppose to subsidizing unaffiliated institutions to have better division of labor. Perhaps we will hear from the secretary or the professor how you will strike a balance between unifying the system and quality. Professor Zhang, under our proposal, the amended Cap 320 that applies to all institutions, we have not said anything about affiliated self-financing institutions. We have not used the term delinked, but they will be subject to the same regulatory framework. So institutions are set up by publicly funded universities, and its relationship with the affiliated university is not mentioned at all at the moment. We still need time to work out the details. What the task force will not do is to sacrifice quality in order to bring them all under the same system. Institutions, whether they are affiliated with universities or not, should endeavor to improve their quality. Dr. Cheng Chung-tai. Well, can we ask the administration to speed up their reply? Because we only have 3 minutes. I can't possibly ask questions about a study. So can you start the time again? First, I would like to hear about your stance on the associate degree. Is it going to be phased out, replaced? Or how are you going to deal with it? Secretary. The task force is currently consulting the public. We don't have a set stance. The second point is about associate degree. It seems from the report that whether they are publicly funded or self-financed, there is still room for them to continue to operate. Is that right? Or is it the case that for associate degrees under self-financed institutions or those that are affiliated with universities, they will be phased out? That means for publicly funded universities and their affiliated institutions will no longer offer associate degree programs. Associate degree, some of them are run under affiliated institutions of publicly funded universities, and some are private ones. We think that, associate degrees and a higher diploma should be kept. This binary system should be kept, but there should be better differentiation. So when it comes to associate degree programs, whether they are offered by affiliated institutions or not, the current mode of operation should be preserved. The qualification should be preserved. Of course, the mode of operation will be different whether it is an affiliated institution or not. You talk about a binary system being maintained and developed at the same time. In your report, have you said anything about the difference not being a quantitative one? Because it seems that in the report they try to categorize these self-financed institutions by number of students. However, the mode of operation of these institutions are rather different. Should the report use a different perspective or more different perspective to analyze these self-financing institutions? In a consultation paper, we don't intend to use number of students to grade them. But in the provision of information we have, said that for different institutions, the number of students is such as such. The most important thing is that the courses offered will meet needs of society and for students to take them and then to further their studies or to go to join the workforce. In 3.3, it says that they have used number of students as a differentiation. However, in the report, they have not mentioned that for Caritas, Xuyan, and Hang Seng commercial schools, they have not made further differentiation. If there is a division of labor or differentiation, then you do need to pay attention to the unique qualities of different institutions. I actually echo Dr. Chang's views. We will look at their specialties as well as the different characteristics of these different institutions. We will take down members' views and forward them to the administration for following up. Next, Mr. Ted Ho. Well, I see the guiding principle of this task force as saying that it should be student-oriented quality education. I think it is rather ironic. When it comes to self-financing institutions, a lot of students have got the qualification, but they can't get a place for publicly financed places. What are the major difficulties in increasing the number of publicly funded university places? These students, they may not get a place in publicly funded institutions, and they sign up for associate degree programs. What I see is that the quality of these programs vary greatly. Or sometimes these associate degree programs are very similar to undergraduate programs. So how come they are not given a publicly funded places? Is associate degree used just to make money?
And some of these sub-degree programs are very much like vocational training programs. So is there a justification for them to be kept as post-secondary education programs? You talk about a binary system. Is it necessary? Let's not forget that upon graduation, some 80% of them will articulate into undergrad programs, and many of them have found it difficult, and they have not been able to pursue further studies in undergraduate programs. In the end, they have paid high tuition fees. At least they should not be required to pay the interest for such programs, because for such students, they are already suffering. So should you not do something to help them out and make it less difficult for them? Well, under the existing system, we do have the basic requirement for enrollment into universities. That's 3322. In other words, for Chinese English, they will have to get grade 2. And then for mathematics and liberal studies, they will have to get at least grade 3. So that's the basic requirement. And if you're able to meet that basic requirement in Hong Kong, we do have sufficient number of first year, first degree program places for them. But then the thing is, for the 15,000 places offered by the UGC, we also have the SSSDP. That is, these are also study subsidy scheme for designated professions and sectors, and for individual students, they are also eligible for $30,000 grant or loan for eligible programs. So there are also other assistance. So it's not a problem for those who are eligible for these programs. But then the problem is for students who try to pursue sub-degree programs, associate degree, or higher diploma degrees run by these self-financing institutions. The thing is, can the positioning be clearer? And that would also help solve the problem raised by Mr. Hui, because they don't know the positioning, and some would also like to do this, and others something different. So after looking at the observation by the task force, whether or not is the AD or high D HD program, they do have their unique roles, and therefore they should be better defined, so that when students opt for them, they would know what their choice is. As for other issues, I think I'll leave it to later. Next, Starry Lee. Madam Chair, for the entire paper, I think the community and us would be most concerned about the positioning of associate degree and also the way forward. I think I've heard two voices. That is, Bureau Director, you said that the government has an open mind, and Professor Jiang, according to my understanding of your reply, you said that the binary system will continue. They will have their own unique role. So can you confirm that upon the end of the consultation, what is the government going to do to define the role to be played by associate degree? And I think that's a very critical part of our consideration. Bureau Director, I think the task force has its view, and it is consulting the community. And in the end, they are going to submit a report to the administration, and then we'll make a decision upon receiving that report. That's the reason why I said that we have not got any preconceived idea, because we need to look at the final report by the task force before making a decision. And given the fact that the task force has studied the matter for a long time, and there is also this consultation exercise, of course, we're going to attach a lot of importance to its final report. Then I'll have to put it to the professor. Okay, Professor Jiang, according to what you said, I think the reason why many young people are not happy, that's because after pursuing sub-degree programs, they have not been able to articulate into undergraduate programs, and that's why they are not happy. But then for higher degree or higher diploma courses, they are very vocational and profession-oriented. That's why for those pursuing such studies, they are not that unhappy. So in terms of the ratio between AD and HD, should there be some adjustments so that there would not be this expectation discrepancy? Well, my personal view is that as a qualification, both AD and HD can be kept. But then in practice, how many students would be pursuing AD or HD programs? That depends on the market needs at the time. And if students are able to meet the basic requirement for undergraduate programs, and in terms of supply of undergraduate programs, whether subsidized or not, if there is enough number, then of course very few students will be pursuing AD programs. Instead, they'll just go for the undergraduate programs. And if HD programs are able to meet the needs of the job market, then many students, upon pursuing HD programs, they'll be able to take up jobs, or they'll just take up more professional or vocationally oriented undergraduate programs. So that's to meet our requirement that there should be diversified pathways for students. Next, Cheung Kwok Kwan. All right, you have answered the question already. Okay, next, Mr. Cheung. Madam Chair. Well, today, as some members have said, for self-financing institutions and also sub-degree programs, the origin is that back in year 2000, we'd like to increase the percentage of students from the right age group pursuing higher studies. So in order to increase that ratio, we try to encourage more institutions to start these self-financing institutions. And since year 2000, we have allowed the sector to develop on its own. And as a result, we are now looking at a problem with regard to the survival of some institutions and also the quality of these programs and also the accreditation of such programs and so on. I think the administration has the moral responsibility to ensure that everything will be sorted out properly. And if you ask me, then I would expect that it's a bit too late, because we waited for 18 years. But then it's better late than never. And the fact that we have this report, I would support and recognize the efforts made by the task force in making the recommendations. And if you look at the recommendations in particular, well, just now Professor Cheung also said that there should be a binary system and they should not be made supplementary to each other. In fact, these institutions should find their own positioning and develop their own roles. I think that's very important. And also, as to AD and HD programs, how they should position themselves, I think is also very important, because if you ask parents and students in a community as to the distinction between AD and HD, or if you put it to the employers, they might not be able to give you a very clear answer. So I think we should take the opportunity to rationalize everything. So I'd like to ask the Professor this, or with regard to self-financing institutions, and you talk about specialization and so on, and the positioning of individual programs and so on. According to your thinking, what needs to be done to promote the institution's development so that they would be developing in their own excellence areas, and what role are you going to play? And also recently, some tertiary institutions heads have told us that, well, for the UGC-funded institutions, they have used their own brand name and they have an advantage, and therefore they are actually being suppressed, because once you set up a subsidiary institution under the UGC-funded institution's name, it's already a brand name. So what's the relationship between these colleges and the UGC-funded institutions? They do question that. So many of these heads of institutions have talked to me about those. So what is your view on this? Bureau Director's response first. A very quick response, Madam Chair. Well, obviously, the task force is making a recommendation. That is for the UGC-funded institutions, whether they have subsidiary colleges and so on, or they have a part to play in setting up these institutions offering such programs. When compared to independent institutions offering such programs, the task force recommended that they should be subject to the same uniform regulatory mechanism. In other words, their education standards will have to be enhanced, and the gap between the two should be narrowed. So we try to resolve these problems through the reform of the system. But then in the minds of parents and students, if they prefer certain institutions and so on, it would take time to resolve this problem. We shouldn't be making the choices for them. It's hard for the administration to guide them into making their choices. And to answer the first question as to what the government is going to do to make sure that in individual areas they're going to develop their own expertise and so on. And if that's recommended by the task force, and if indeed that's the view shared by the community, we will think along those lines. But then if you just put it to me now, I think the most important thing is to discuss with them more, to look at their own strengths and development before we can come up with a package for them, because individual institutions are different. And I cannot just designate that a particular institution can only do this, or you would only be allowed to do this. For the time being, we simply don't have that system in place. We simply cannot do it. And of course, the task force might say that we might mandate a particular institution in doing certain things. Well, that's something for the future. We'll consider that when it's proposed. Okay. We also have Ray Chen asking in the first round. Anyone else? Okay, if none. Well, in the first round, we have Ray Chen, and then in the second round, we have Starry Lee, and also IP Kin-yuen, and also Ao Lok Hin. 3 in the second round. Okay, I'll draw a line there. Ray Chen. Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, for the documents submitted by the administration, they have not really touched on the highlighter. That's about the relaxation of the restriction on the enrollment of students. In particular, they are actually recruiting or enrolling students from the Bay Area. In fact, that's put under item 2. That is for the existing self-financing post-secondary sector, whether or not it's favorable to the long-term development of the sector and so on. And in para 1.13, you said that well, Hong Kong as a tertiary education hub, it will become more important with the development of the Bay Area. That's why we will have to look at the policy of enrolling non-local students by these institutions so that they can also play a role in the process. And if you look at the footnote, well, Well, for self-financing institutions who are allowed to enroll students from the mainland, there is at present a restriction. That is, for students from Macau and other areas is no more than 10%. There is this current quota, but then as the student population is dwindling, that's why you're saying that we should relax the criteria so that they would be allowed to recruit students from the Great Bay Area. I'm very concerned about this, because if self-financing institutions are actually commercialized and they are doing a business, then of course the bigger the market, the better. And then there will be fewer restrictions and so on. But then we've often said that education should not be viewed as a commercial operation. And commercializing it will bring about many problems. For example, resource problems, housing problems, and also employment problems. So these are the problems that can arise. So you talk about relaxing the 10% quota. What do you mean? Are you saying that you'll be increasing the percentage from 10% to higher? Or are you saying that from the Great Bay Area, you will not regard those students as non-local students because Hong Kong people will become Great Bay people? So if you do not count them as non-local students, then there would be a huge difference, because initially when you introduce this 10% quota, and why are you now considering relaxing it? Because once you relax it, it will be hard for you to tighten it up again. Is it purely based on the fact that we have a dwindled or a shrunken student base? That's why you have to relax it, or what? Professor? Well, that's proposed by the consultation document. In fact, in the past, in the process of drafting this consultation document, we have heard views from the stakeholders, and they're of the view that for the 10% quota is too rigid, and therefore they'd like to be more flexible. But then it might not be as high as what Ray Chan has said, that well, for Great Bay Area students, they would be treated as local students. Well, in fact, it would be like what Ray Chan said. It's not just about housing and so on. There are a basket of factors to be considered. That's why we are more than happy to listen to the views from the community. And by the time when we implement that in our report, there would be more practical views. But then, all in all, most institutions would like it to be more flexible in terms of enrolling students. Okay, we now have the second round. What I'd like to ask is, I received a motion from Hon Kin.
I would like to ask members, are there any more motions? Because I have to make time for it. So there is a motion from Mr. Hon Kin. I'll start with the second round, 2 minutes, question and answers included. Ms. Starry Lee. I would like to ask about associate degree. Over the years, some of the graduates further their studies with undergraduate programs. Well, what is the percentage of students who have joined the workforce, who have furthered their studies on the mainland and or overseas? Yes, there are statistics with the Education Bureau. In recent years, as 80% of associate degree graduates would go to undergraduate programs. They are self-financed or publicly financed one or not. And 40% of them will from higher diploma. I don't think there are 80% of articulation programs available for associate degree graduates. Majority of them further their studies onto articulation programs locally. We do have sufficient articulation programs for qualified graduates of associate degrees to take, so your idea is wrong. For those who don't further their studies, that means that they are not qualified. They have not obtained the qualification to go to articulation programs. Is that right? Well, by that I mean publicly funded articulation programs and self-financed articulation programs. Some of them will go to year 3, some of them will start with year 1 or year 2. Do you need more figures? Can you give me the figures after the meeting? The Secretariat will follow this up. Next, Mr. IP Kin-yuen. I would like to say something about what other members have said. For non-local students, we're all concerned that when it comes to UGC institutions and the percentage of non-local postgraduate students is quite high. And if you want to increase the percentage of non-local students, well, I'm not saying that it should not be done, but you do have to consider a balance between local students and non-local students. And then you will have to consider the mission of self-financing sectors. Non-local students can be complementary. You can use it as a diversification, but it's a secondary mission. The second point I would like to say is about associate degrees, as mentioned by Ms. Dari Lee. Just now the official said that students may go to articulation programs of higher years or lower years. Some of them may choose to start from year 1. And if they start with higher years, that means they would use a lower cost to finish the first 2 years. And when they complete the undergraduate degree, then they will be the same as others. Of course, for different pathways, there are different problems. How do you rationalize the whole matter? I do think the task force should consider how to improve articulation. The task force said that there should be better differentiation of a higher diploma. How do you promote higher diploma programs? The cost of higher diploma is higher than associate degrees, especially when it comes to vocational programs. Are there any ways for the administration to assist institutions to improve the quality of higher diploma programs? Higher diploma programs should be articulated to undergraduate programs or higher degree programs. You need to further promote it. I don't think you have time to answer, but I ask the task force and the administration to consider that. Next, Mr. Au Nok Kin. After Mr. Au has spoken, we will deal with his motion. Perhaps we'll ask the Secretariat to ring the bell. We don't have a quorum at the moment. Mr. Au, you have your 2 minutes, and then Professor Zheng will speak and we'll deal with your motion. I don't really agree with Education Bureau in reply to Ms. Dari Lee's answer, saying that there is sufficient places for associate degree graduates. Let me give you some figures. About 20,000 associate degree students. UGC funded places stands at 5,000. So only 1 out of 4 associate degree graduates can go to UGC funded. For self-financed places, that may be sufficient, but will students choose them? For some of the self-financed undergraduate programs, they may have a lower entry requirement than associate degrees. So the problem is, how do you improve the acceptance of these programs? I think it will be more ideal for these students to go back to the UGC-funded institutions by increasing number of UGC-funded places. When I taught associate degree programs, do you know that every year there is a caste system like that in India? Say, for example, in year 1 there are 4 groups. Well, those elite ones will group together. There are some others who would like to get a place in the university. However, they have been grouped with hopeless students. That is not education. We need to increase the number of UGC-funded undergraduate degree places. We have to increase the quality of teaching of self-financed institutions affiliated with universities. Well, you can look at current demand from in our society, and then you offer programs to target these niches. Professor Zhang, you only have Mr. Tommy Zhang, you only have 2 minutes. Well, the Liberal Party have just met with the Chief Executive. We said that we don't really support continuation of self-financed associate degree programs. Instead, there should be vocational programs to help students find jobs and to better equip themselves. Previously, I have spoken about associate degree programs. I don't think many people are like me that I study for a junior a degree, an associate degree in a junior college in the US, and then it was a stepping stone for me to go to universities. Huh? It's already over 2 minutes for me. That's too quick. I thought I'm so senile that I can't control time. Well, for associate degrees in the US, they would study for 2 years, and if they don't do well, they will not continue. But if you do well, then there's no problem for you to go to a proper university. I was in South California, and I could easily go to UCLA and articulate it to a university program. So it's difficult to enter, but not difficult to graduate. When a university admits a student, that student will very likely graduate. Otherwise, the university will have to explain. So if you run associate degree programs, then you should enable articulation. Without articulation, you should not run these associate degree programs. Instead, you should offer vocational programs or higher diploma programs for the student to find a job because they are better equipped, or they have received training for special skills in 2 years' time. You really need to give me an answer. We have heard the views of Mr. Zhang. The task force and administration will carefully consider that. Professor, just now, Mr. Zhang said that if one completes associate degrees, there should be articulation available. That's what we have in mind. For self-financed and UGC programs, there should be articulation. Well, for self-financed programs, for different programs and different institutions, the quality may vary. But we do want to improve the quality of all these programs. For UGC institutions, well, now it's a 4-year program compared to a decade ago when it was a 3-year. Well, you do need to provide more articulation places. Quorum bells just finished ringing. We now deal with Mr. Ao Nok Kin's motion. You see the motion tabled in front of you. Mr. Ao, please read out your motion. Well, this panel urges the administration to reject commercialization of education, and that should be increasing the number of places of publicly funded places, improve regulation and supervision to ensure higher quality. Those who are in favor of the motion, please raise their hands. 10, 11 who support this. Those who object, 1. Those who abstain, 4. I declare Mr. Ao Nok Kin's motion is endorsed. At the start of this item, a member asked to have a public hearing before the start of the consultation. We have been notified just now by the Secretariat that on the 19th and to the 21st of July, all conference rooms will be under renovation until mid-September. So there won't be any venues available. Secretary, can you make arrangements to get it done with the administration, maybe not in the form of a public hearing, but to receive views from different stakeholders and bodies? Mr. Horace Chung? It's a point of order. Well, for motions like that, could we have been given to it earlier? It was only given to me halfway through the bell. I had no time to digest it, and even if I wanted to propose an amendment, it simply couldn't be done. I ask members to submit motions halfway through meetings. Well, if there are motions to be moved, please give it to us halfway through the meeting, so that members may read it through, or if they wish to do so, they may amend it. We try to do it as early as possible. I thank representatives for attending this meeting. Thank you, Professor Zhou. Now is the next item. An update on the situation of contract teachers in primary and secondary schools. We have with us the Secretary, Mr. Kevin Young, and 2 government officials, Mrs. Michelle Wong and Mr. Benjamin Yong. They are both from the Education Bureau. Secretary, please take us through the paper. A stable work environment can improve morale as well as quality of education. In recent years, the Education Bureau has reviewed manpower resources, and we have also implemented a number of measures, new measures to stabilize the teaching force.
And there has been an increase of a teacher-to-class ratio by 0.1, and also we have also introduced the guidance teachers and support and also other teachers. And according to our estimate, the relevant measures will be able to bring in about 3,000 regular teachers posts. That would also help enhance the quality. And there are also about 2,000 primary and secondary school teachers vacancies, and that will also increase or improve the prospect of teachers. About 1,700 teachers who have been contract teachers in 2017 and 2016 and 17, and they will become regular teachers under their establishment. And according to the present arrangement, most teachers are regular teachers, and therefore we believe that the existing establishment, together with the cash grant that is being offered, that would enable schools to have greater flexibility in redeploying their resources. Yes, contract teachers are outside of the establishment. They are still responsible for promoting the development of students and schools. We will continue to encourage schools in becoming good employers, and they will also make good use of the resources provided by the Education Bureau. And in engaging contract teachers, reasonable terms of service would be offered so that there would be beneficial environment for contract teachers to continue to develop in the education sector. We will continue to listen to the views of the various stakeholders in how we can make best use of human resources in the education sector. And we would also be looking at the actual needs and also priority of deploying resources. We will continue to provide quality education. Thank you. If members have any motions to move, please make sure that you submit them before 11:15, because the Secretariat will need time to process that. For the time being, we only have one motion from Hon HO Kai-ming. Next, the floor is open to members. And we only have three members rather, who have indicated that they'd like to speak, so 4 minutes each. First, Ray Chen, and next, Hon HO Kai-ming, and then Chiang Kwok-kwan, and then Ted Hui. First, Ray Chen. Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, we're discussing the issue of contract teachers, and all along, they are treated like second-class teachers. When it comes to contract renewal, they have no idea as to whether they can get their contract renewed, and also for work stress, and also the treatment that they are given at schools. Apparently, they are second-class citizens. And in the paper, the administration said that you will continue to encourage schools to continue to be good employers, so that reasonable terms of service will be offered to contract teachers. But then if you browse the chat groups, well, many contract teachers have complained that they have been treated unfairly. You can easily find that, for example, in terms of workload, is obviously much higher than their regular teacher counterparts, and they have also been given jobs on IT and so on, and they dare not refuse it, because if the schools think that they are not cooperative, if they lack initiative and so on, then they won't have their contract renewed, and they will have to work until the small hours of the morning. And even if you are prepared to accept all eventualities and all extra requirements, it doesn't mean that you'll get your contract renewed, because very often in the very last minute, the schools will say that their performance has not been very good, and all sorts of reasons are used to discontinue their contract. All right, what you said has been very positive, but then other than the carrot approach, would there also be a stick, so that for schools who have unreasonably dismissed these contract teachers, well, please do not ask them to go to the Labor Department. But then under your current mechanism, does the Bureau, during the past few years, penalize schools which have unfairly treated contract teachers and so on? Do you have such statistics? Yes, Bureau Director. Would you be punishing the schools concerned? Well, as we have set out in a paper, within the schools, inevitably there needs to be contract teachers, because we do have cash grants, and for various reasons, sometimes that might fluctuate. Sometimes there might be more, sometimes there might be none. So whether or not the schools will have money to hire such teachers and so on, that would depend on the needs of the schools concerned, or whether or not that can continue in the future. But then, as we have also said in the paper, the government's stance is that the schools should offer them a reasonable terms of service, and also pay should be commensurate with their duties and so on. But then we do have this school-based approach. So that's mainly between the schools as an employer and the teachers as employees. But then in 2016 and 2017, in the papers that we have sent to schools, we have already asked them to treat contract staff well, and they should be offered reasonable terms and conditions of employment, and they should not be asked to take on management or administrative duties. As to figures, I'll ask if my colleague has that. Yes, who is to answer the questions? Yes, Mrs. Wang. Thank you, Madam Chair. In dealing with contract teachers, and if schools encounter any problems, then other than reflecting that to the school authorities, very often the contract teachers can also talk to our district office colleagues. It depends on the situation and also the background of the schools. Have you ever punished any schools for that? Well, for the time being, I can't really give you the figures, but then basically we try to act as a middleman. We will look at the reasonableness of the case. So you try to mediate between the schools and the teachers, right? So you're just playing the role of a moderator or mediator. But then have you had cases whereby the schools will decide to renew the contract of the teachers concerned? Well, it depends on the situations of the teachers concerned, and every case is different. So we have been emphasizing that it has to be reasonable. So we'll have to look at the merits of the case every time. And if there are cases, we will follow up. Well, maybe my colleague can follow up on my behalf. Well, you're subjectively hoping that the whole thing will be dealt with reasonably. But then what if it's unreasonable? What are you going to do? Well, you will have to think about the mechanism. Next, Ho Kai-ming. Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, we understand that the Education Bureau is trying to increase the number of GM posts. I think this is a good practice. But then at the same time, well, at present, for some teachers, in particular, if they want to change schools, they are not really protected, because the contract would mean that they can only be counted starting from the 1st of September. But then for most teachers, before the 1st of September, they already have to go back to schools to make preparations and to have meetings with their colleagues and so on. But then during that period of time, the school headmaster would require them to be there to make preparation. But then during that time, they are not paid, and there is no insurance coverage whatsoever. And should anything happen, they are not protected. So theoretically, they are just volunteers, and they would be asked to go back to make preparation and so on. But then we have already talked to the Bureau about this. Well, can their contract be extended so that their contract will only expire in mid-August? That would afford them with better protection. That has not happened. So what are you going to do? Will you consider allowing that? Given the fact that this is a practical situation, this is a practical thing that has been done by schools and teachers. So when schools require them to go back to work, they should be paid, and they should also be given insurance coverage. It's not about money. It's about if something untoward happens, they should be properly protected. So will you consider making such fine-tuning or minor adjustment? Bureau Director. Chairman, in fact, the current arrangement is that for teaching duties, well, that would only start on the 1st of September. That's the start of the school term or school year. That's why, well, for the teachers' work, we would be looking at that as part of the school year, and therefore is from the 1st of September to the 31st of August the following year. Well, Mr. Ho, you were referring to schools. Well, you can't just go into the classroom on the 1st of September, and you will have to have preparation meetings with your colleagues so that things can be sorted out beforehand. Well, within the sector, I think that's the common practice, and normally speaking, for such meetings, they are not very onerous. You're not talking about 8-hour meetings. It's not a full-time job. So it's not just in the education sector. In other sectors, before you start work, you will have to go to the company concerned to have a better understanding of the operation and so on. You said that the contract start time should be advanced, but then that would also mean that the expiry data would also have to be shortened. So does it mean that the contract will also expire on the 15th of August the following year? So that's something that we will have to talk to the schools concerned to see if that's feasible. Indeed, as far as the government's resources and management are concerned, is no change. But then if you change the dates, there might be implications on the schools concerned. Well, I think teachers are not worried about their pay. You're right. It's not just it's not about the meetings being too long, but then we've also received some cases. What if there are accidents? So will they be covered in terms of insurance? Because now they are working as volunteers, and if they had a fall in the schools, will they be covered? No, that's not true, because schools will have to take out third-party insurance, and of course that cannot be treated as industrial accident or occupational injury and so on. But then still there would be third-party indemnity coverage. But then we can talk to the schools to see if the contract can be advanced so that from the 16th of August and then to the 15th of August the next year. All right, we have 4 more members. 2 have just joined us. So they will all be given 4 minutes, but then if there are other members coming in, I'm afraid we can't give them 4 minutes. Okay, Chiang Kwok-wan. Thank you, Madam Chair. All along, the DAB supports that contract teachers should be converted to regular teachers. I think that's very important to teachers in schools. But then I've noticed some problems. I'd like to clarify them, because I noticed that at present, they'd like to have more regular teacher posts, but then there are some initiatives, for example, for senior secondary grant and also for career and life planning grant that would be used for hiring contract teachers, and also for the curriculum support grant that is for special education needs coordination, that has also been changed into a regular teaching post. Yes, it's good to have more regular teaching posts. But then for such grants, in the past when that was offered to schools, the original intention was that, all right, I give you this grant and then you can also hire a contract teacher in the following year. Is that the case? Because earlier on, I heard that for career and life planning grant, after it's been converted into a regular teaching post, well, for a teacher in a school teaching students career and life planning, the effect might not be very good. It's not that it's not good in itself, but then it's not enough.
How can one single teacher can comprehensively and accurately tell students how to make career and life planning? They will need to take students out of the classroom into the real world, to, say, for example, a workplace for experience. So using career and life planning grants as an example, when the teaching post is turned into a permanent one, does it mean that there will be less resources spent on students to organize career and life planning activities and programs? I would like to know. Secretary, when we designed career and life planning grant, I think it was about 3-4 years ago, our first idea was that we needed to promote career and life planning in a school. That can be done by a teacher. We also need teachers to coordinate, to understand the needs of students, and to find information and resources to help students. So when we first designed it, it was meant for teachers. It was a new idea. We calculated based on the pay of a teacher. we incorporated flexibilities to see if schools can use the money to employ someone as a contract teacher or do it any other way. After 2 years, we allow schools, if they so wish, to choose to change the grant to a permanent teaching post. Some schools haven't made such a choice yet because they would prefer the flexibility of a grant. We will continue to monitor the situation and to find out which is the better way. Would that be this case? Well, it's either a permanent teaching post or the grant for activities. I think for life and career planning, it's A and B. Well, let's assume that A is the teaching post. Apart from the teacher, well, for those who choose to change it, there is a subsidy available. We do think that career and life planning is very important. So there are resources available elsewhere for the school to use. And if the school thinks that it's not enough, well then the government will have to consider whether there is sufficient resources made available. But I don't think at this moment that is a major problem. I would like to ask any other motions? If not, I won't receive any more motions. Next is Mr. Ted Hui. Paragraph 14 in the conclusion. Well, there's a rather vague sentence. You said that you fully recognize the contributions of contract teachers. Well, they have a heavy workload. They have worked very hard. The way I see it is that, well, for schools with the flexibility, it should be kept because contract teachers give them the flexibility, and you don't think that the existence of contract teachers itself is a problem. But you have heard a lot about unfair treatment of contract teachers because of the flexibilities they offer. Is it the case that they receive a smaller pay and they can do a lot of things, so they are used? However, this will adversely affect teaching quality. So I would like to ask the Secretary, do you agree that in the end there should not be any contract teachers? As the papers said, in the teaching environment, we do need contract teachers. There are cash grants available because of certain policies. Say, for example, study grant, and that is dispensed depending on the number of students with special educational needs, and the grant and another grant which is dispensed by the number of non-Chinese speaking students. Well, if, say, for example, 2 teachers are employed because of special educational needs students, and in 2 years' time there are less SEN students, then they don't need that many teachers for these students. If they are all permanent teachers, they will not have the flexibility to make adjustments. I think you have lumped 2 ideas together: the need for contract teachers and remuneration of contract teachers. Some will think that contract teachers don't have appropriate remuneration, so they wonder whether they need to be kept. Well, in the past 2 years, we have spent a lot of time to try to improve remuneration and terms and conditions of employment of contract teachers. We talked to schools. We ask teachers not to use contracts as a means to manage the teaching staff. Say, for example, well, you will have to do 10 more things before we renew your contract. We don't think schools should use these measures. Well, where there are permanent posts available and the teachers are of high quality, then they should use the opportunity to change these contract posts to permanent ones. However, and at the same time, well, you employ contract teachers to meet special needs, you need to give them reasonable pay, and you should not unreasonably ask them to do more than they are supposed to, or to work longer hours. And then these will be our major areas of work. Are there many cases under which there are permanent posts available, but contracts teachers are still employed? Yes, let me defer to my colleague for further information. Every year when we answer special finance committee questions, we provide information. Well, teaching posts in the establishment that are employed by way of a contract are used to cater for exceptional circumstances. These include, say, for example, a primary school. They may use this way to employ teachers. That is reasonable. But other than that, we don't encourage it. If schools use this to do this to employ teachers and the situation has not improved, we will talk to the school. Several years ago, we were concerned about this, but over the years, with joint efforts of Education Bureau and teachers and schools, the situation has improved. For 2017-18, yes, the situation persists. However, well, because of the increase of ratio by 0.1, the number of permanent posts has increased. Schools know their responsibility as an employer by providing reasonable terms. Please keep in view the situation when teachers are recruited on a contract basis to fill a permanent post. Well, if you have to sign contracts with them, why not simply turn that position into a permanent one? Well, we keep in view the number of permanent posts being filled by contract teachers. We see that the situation has improved. We also look at the number of schools using this approach. We see that the terms has shortened somewhat. Next, Mr. Kin-yuen. The PTU has conducted a survey. It's an ongoing survey for a number of years. You will find our latest survey report. Please refer to it. We find from our survey a situation that we see. There are some macro issues. Just now the Secretary said that there is a need for contract teachers for adjustments. Say, for example, special circumstances, NEC students or SEN students, so they need short-term contract teachers. But when it comes to SEN or NEC students, then you would need teachers who know the students, so a stable teaching force will be favorable. If you use teachers that come and go, the benefit will not be there. So I don't think that should be the reason for having contract teachers. A decade ago, there weren't many contract teachers, and 2 decades ago, there were even less. So do we really need them? I doubt it. The workload of teachers has increased a lot. We have to identify sufficient permanent teaching posts to handle such heavy workload, instead of using contract teachers to make up the shortfall. So there is a strong consensus amongst in the Education Bureau for the ratio to increase by 0.3. That is a macro issue. Is it the case that we don't want to see any contract teachers? That is not the case. But I would like to say that teachers play a very important role. What about how schools deal with contract teachers? There is something good that the administration has done. In June 2016, the permanent secretary met with us and then issued a circular. It's about management of contract teachers. Clear instructions have been given to schools. This helps a lot in the resolution of issues. If you refer to our report, paragraph 3.6, we mentioned that some contract teachers are of contract length of 11 months. It seems to be too mean. In the respondents, 2.6% of contract teachers and 5.3% of teaching assistants have these shorter contracts. Perhaps you need to reiterate it in your circular. And if there are such irregularities found, can we report them to the Education Bureau for them to follow it up? In paragraph 1.3, please give me a bit more time. Teaching assistants and their roles. We found that, some of them will have to teach, some of them don't. Well, how come that teaching assistants will have to teach but not receive the same remuneration as a teacher? We found that for some teaching assistants that have to take up teaching duties, they have a lower salary.
So that for teaching assistants, if they have teaching duties, then they are in practice teachers. So they should not be called they should not be given the title of teaching assistants, and they should also receive remuneration commensurate with the duties. So I hope that that can be done for them. Okay, so would you like to have a response from them, or would you like to just make a comment? Yes, I'd like them to respond. Yes, Bureau Director. Yes, I'll be very brief in my response. Just now, Mr. Ip said that for students with special education needs, we are looking into that too. Because during this period of time, of course, we also need to look at the need of special education students. And in our review with the schools, as Mr. Ip just said, we noticed that some schools are making use of the special educational needs grants to hire more teachers. So we are reviewing the situation to see what can be done under the system, whether or not there are ways to keep the stability while meeting the changing needs year from year. With regard to the microscopic situation, you refer to two problems in some schools. Well, for 11-month contract, back in 2016, in our guideline, we've already made it clear that it's not appropriate for teachers to have an 11-month contract. But then for other short-term jobs, the duration of the contract will depend on the nature of the job. As to teaching assistants, in principle, teaching assistants are not responsible for teaching. Yet we know that some teaching assistants are themselves pursuing some education qualifications, and there might need to be on-the-job practice, and some schools might be taking the opportunity to offer these assistants a chance to accumulate practice experience. I think that's good, because if they can accumulate that experience early, that would facilitate their studies too. So there are different situations in different schools, but then I agree with what you said. If it's purely as what you said, I'm paying you less, and still you would have to do the job of a teacher. That, of course, would not be right. But then we cannot just tar everybody with the same brush. We can't just say that if they engage in teaching, that's not right. We have to look at the situation separately. In dealing with contract teachers or teaching assistants, well, most schools would adopt a very reasonable approach. So we will have to look at the follow-up action. We will look at all schools, and there are some more so-called outrageous cases. We'll be looking into that too. Well, we understand the arrangement, and there is a need for you to look into that. But then, other than on-the-job training, there are cases that are not convincing at all. So you will have to follow up on those cases, and if at all possible, you should reiterate or reissue the 2016 guideline. I think that would help. Okay, the last one. Leung Chi-chung. Thank you, Madam Chair. As set out in the paper, converting them to regular teachers would provide a stable teaching force in the schools, and I think that's good for the long-term development, and we support that. But then for regular teachers' establishment, the Education Bureau will look into the retirement situation or wastage rate. Well, you said that about 2,000 teachers will leave for whatever reason, but then there is no reason why the contract teachers will fill up all these posts. So if there is one teacher retiring, then of course you should hire a regular teacher instead of converting the existing contract teachers to regular teachers. So I don't understand why you are treating that as a way of converting contract teachers to regular teachers. In doing so, you're not increasing the establishment of regular teachers. Is that right? And that's the current situation. That is, there is a need for contract teachers to continue to play a role. So is it that you'll be giving them a special grant for special uses, and then they can use that to hire contract teachers? Is that the case? Well, Madam Chair, I'll answer the two questions in one go. With regard to policy requirements, sometimes we would give extra resources to the schools. For example, as we just said, if we want them to have a special educational needs coordinator, we will give them a grant. And then sometimes they would also need to hire contract teachers because of their own special needs, and they can use the resources flexibly to do it. So to answer your first question first, indeed, they have a lot of flexibility. They can look at their teaching and operational needs to use the resources that they have. And of course, if we make it clear that if it's that it should be used on students or it should be used on SEN students, and of course that should only be used for STEM students. Well, for SEN students and also non-ethnic Chinese students every year, it depends on the number of such students. There is a way to calculate the amount that they would need. So there is a formula. So that would be offered on practical needs. Yes, the procedures are very simple because they also have to report to us certain situation. So it's not a very difficult procedure. And every year, because they know in advance as to how many students that they are taking in this year. And of course, in between years, there might be some discrepancy. For example, well, they might not be sure about the exact number of students because we have students there for at least 5 years. So from S1, you'd be able to tell how much more you'd need for the next 5 years, for example. As to the natural wastage by retirement and natural resignation and so on. Well, if there is a vacancy arising from such natural wastage, they have different choices. They can just hire a regular teacher from another school. They can also hire a contract teacher from another school, or they can just have an open recruitment, or they can also have fresh graduates who can join the schools. So for these vacancies, contract teachers can apply to fill a regular teacher's post. We would not say that for regular teacher's post, you can only fill it with a regular teacher because the disciplines and subjects might be different. But then taking last year as an example, well, we have also increased the number of classes, and then introducing this, we have also asked them to give priority to contract teachers. So that's the direction that we have taken. And then if a school has a very good contract teacher who has been doing remarkably well, then of course when there is a vacancy arising, it rather hire an existing contract teacher than hiring a new one from outside. Okay, I know that for the existing contract teachers, if they know that they are doing very well, then if there is a teacher requiring, then of course it would be more than willing to allow that contract teacher to fill that regular teacher post. But then are you going to allow for more vacancies to be created? For example, in 2018 and 19, we're going to create 500 more regular teacher posts, and then schools can just convert their existing contract teachers to regular teachers. Can that be done? No. Every time when there is an increase to regular teachers' establishment, there must be a policy behind it, or there must be an overall arrangement. For example, last year, 2017 and 18, out of the $3.6 billion, we have increased the ratio to by 0.1. And if we decide to convert a contract teacher to a regular teacher post, well, every school will be allowed to do so for one post. So that would be a policy. So they can calculate, for example, you have so many vacancies, and then you can do the recruitment and so on. We also ask the schools to have a school-based mechanism, and then for each school-based mechanism, well, when there are vacancies arising, the contract teachers should be converted to regular teachers' posts. So have you done any estimate for 2018 and 19? How many such posts will be created? Well, for the time being, for 2018 and 19, we haven't really decided to increase the number of or the size of the establishment. But then last year, as we said, in 3 years, we're going to turn the special educational needs coordinator into regular posts. So this year we're going to have about 200 plus such coordinators posts. But then for the others, we haven't seen the need yet. For example, for career and life planning grant, would schools want to change that or use that grant to create more regular teachers posts? We don't know. Okay, time's up. And we now need to deal with Ho Kai-ming's motion. I might need to extend the meeting by a few minutes because we have to ring the quorum bell. Please ring the quorum bell.
呢3個人你點樣處理啊？冇點解？ 要求打 voting bell 嘛。No， 夠人就得啦嘛 ，quorum bell。大會個 quorum bell 一嚿人就得。而家 voting bell 啊？咁呢就各位同事，我哋將
Colleagues, we'll deal with the motion moved by Mr. Ho Kai-ming.
9個人，仲爭2個。
We have 9 members here, and we are still short of 2 to make a quorum.
哦。唔得，響緊公平。佢哋打咗投票鐘，冇佢打 quorum 鐘。佢打咗投票鐘。係打投票鐘就一定5分鐘。quorum 咧，我哋仲可以夠人就喐，係嘛？而家未夠。係啊。夠人啊，不過要5分鐘。quorum 咧，打 quorum bell 嘅話咧，就
Once the quorum bell is rung, as soon as we form a quorum, we can immediately put the matter to the vote on the earlier motion. At the time, there was another member who was late, and he'd like to ask questions first. That's why I gave him an extra 2 to 3 minutes so that he can ask his questions before we dealt with Mr. Aulok Him's motion. Right now, we have rung the quorum bell, and so long as we have a quorum, we can immediately vote on the matter. But then I've already instructed that the quorum bell be rung, and it turned out to be the voting bell, and you have to wait for a full 5 minutes. That's it. So sometimes as the chairperson, it's hard to deal with such situations. Like Chiang Kwok-kwan, he said that, well, in moving certain motions, you were so late in making the in moving the motions, and I can't move any amendment. Well, so long as they are directly related to the item under discussion, I cannot just disallow it. And if they just submitted it a few minutes before the wrapping up of the discussion, I would try my best to accommodate that. That's the reason why I've been appealing to members that they should submit it as early as possible, because the Secretariat has been very busy, and other members would also need time to look at the wording before they decide on how to vote. So as the chair, I have to be very careful.
It seems that there is a trend that you will at any time be the subject of a no confidence motion. I have the deputy next to me. He's been telling me to be careful all the time. Please be patient and wait for another 30 seconds or so.
何啟明啊，爭取時間啦。
Mr. Jonathan Ho, could you please read? Well, I only have 30 seconds to read it, but it may not directly be related to today's topic. It's about permanent posts. We hope that GM posts and APSM posts will be aligned with their degree. I ask members to support my motion so that a timetable can be set to align the title with the qualification. Mr. Jonathan Ho, I have to check it. Just now the secretary confirmed that, well, yes, there are permanent posts using contract teachers. Those who are in favor of Mr. Ho's motion, please raise their hands. It's the majority. Those who oppose, please raise their hands. None. Abstention. None. So Mr. Jonathan Ho's motion is passed. Next, any other business? Any other business? No. So meeting is adjourned, and this is the last meeting of this panel in this legislative year. A happy summer holiday. Thank you.